Chapter 1, My Crazy World. When I was 2 years old, my fondest memory wasn't receiving my first doll or anything like that. It was waking up in the middle of the night and finding Dee crying. My father was nowhere to be found. My house was a crazy place all the time. All they did was fight, scream, and yell at one another. My father would throw things around the house, and sometimes he would grab her. After all the screaming and fighting was over, he would just walk out of the house. He would go downstairs to the bar and put even more liquor into his body than he already had to begin with. When he returned home, he would just act as if nothing had ever happened. Even Dee would play the same game. She believed that if you act like it never happened, then it really did not. But in reality, it did, and it will happen again and again and again. My father was an alcoholic and went out drinking every night. He would come home late, and the fighting would start. I would hear lots of yelling, hitting, and screaming. In addition, there were things being thrown around and broken. It would then get quiet after that. Peeking from around the corner, I would see Dee picking up the broken things off the floor. Afterwards, she would go to the bedroom, where it smelled really bad. He would not be able to hold all the alcohol he consumed and would go on himself. Instead of leaving him in the wet pants, she would help him change his clothes. He would help a little, but for the most part, he was completely under the control of what he was putting into his body. This was a repetitive cycle, and it was a very normal part of my life. Seeing this behavior from such a young age, you start believing that this is normal, but then you find out different. I was awakened, and after that, my entire image of normal was completely messed up. This was my normal life from the time I came into the world. From people looking in, they would see dysfunction, while I saw normal. I was walking around in a daze. As they spent all their time and energy fighting, trying to kill themselves, they failed to realize that they were still parents. Whether biological or not, they were the adults. They were supposed to be taking care of me, but that just wasn't happening. From the way it looked, it wasn't going to happen anytime soon either. I was just a little girl, but I wished it would all stop. I wanted to be normal and just a child. All I really wanted was to go to the park and not have to worry if something happens to my parents. Who would take care of me? What would happen to me? I was a kid and I was not supposed to worry about things like that. But in my mind, I felt it was completely necessary. Dee was not an entirely strong person, and she was getting weaker. There was something just not right about her. I didn't refer to her as mother, as she wasn't. I called her by her first name. I felt no love from her, and no love was ever returned to her. There was no exchange of any emotions. It was as if she hated me and had a great deal of bitterness and resentment towards me. Growing up, and by the age of 2, she developed polio. She had to have several surgeries so that she could walk. After the surgery, she was left with scars and a limp for the rest of her life. But at least she was able to walk, because many were left paralyzed permanently. And some actually died from this very serious disease. What she went through was rough, but not the end of the world. The other girls teased her at school, so she would tell me. Sometimes kids can be so mean when they think they're being funny, other people get hurt. Everyone has a disability in some way or another, or some kind of special need, or something you don't do as perfect as everybody else. No one is perfect, and that's the bottom line. I think a lot of people judge other people way too much, and that makes me pretty upset. That's how some people are, so you just get used to it. But I think we're all guilty of judging. We all look at each other and we start to compare ourselves to that person, or we think we're better than that person. But it's just something I think we do as human beings. Probably not a fair thing we do. After you see this happen to someone you know so often, or you see it happen to you, you start thinking that there's something wrong with you. Then you try so hard to become something opposite of what they're saying. Then they say you're going to fail, People say you're going to fail at this or that. You try that much harder to prove them wrong. She would get so upset when people would make fun of her about the way she walked. But after a while, she just got used to it and moved on to the next best thing in her life. That next best thing was thinking of excuses of why she couldn't do certain things because of her past life experiences. She blamed everything in her life on the fact that she came from a messed up family. But in the next breath, she would say she had a wonderful family. She would even say she was daddy's little girl. So perhaps both were true for her. Or maybe she thought in her head it was true. Maybe she didn't have the fight in her. Perhaps her parents did not provide her with the encouragement that life goes on and abilities are born out of disabilities every day. Was I supposed to be figuring this out? Her dysfunction became mine. Maybe she was stuck. Nevertheless, I was a child and I wasn't supposed to figure it out. I do not know what she could have done with her life, really. I would like to say that she could have done anything with her life, but not knowing how bad her circumstances were, I honestly could not say that. She did use a lot of excuses to explain why she couldn't do things or why things were the way they were. As a child, you believe those excuses. The abuse that caused such pain and the cries that went unheard. I learned a few excuses of my own to explain the bruises. I was young, so I used what every other kid used. I fell. That's what happened. I also think she really had some other problems that were under the surface, but I couldn't see because I was a kid. I knew that something was wrong with her, but I just didn't know what. Did she know what I was thinking about her? She would always talk about her family life when she was a child. It would always go something like this. Her father was this mean man who would drink all the time. And her mother would, have the same problem. So they were alcoholics together. All she would do, as she would say, her mother would do, is drink all the time. But the only difference that, her mother would fight back with her husband. I can't see either one is any better for the kids who must witness this madness and get the wrong idea. I understood that Dee came from a messed up family, but judging from that, I thought she would have really fought harder to ensure that the kids in her care wouldn't have to go through the same situations that she did. I know that maybe she didn't plan it this way, but the choices she made put us into serious, bad predicaments. They all thought I would not remember the abuse and the other maltreatment they gave me. Being locked in the closet because I was crying caused a great deal of terror for me. I was crying because I was scared, cold, and hungry, but no one was there to help me. I was left in there for hours alone. I felt isolated with all the silence that came after the eruption. Not long after, they would just leave the house. I would bang on the door for hours, but no one came. My knuckles were near raw from the banging. I had a brother, Donnie, who was actually starting to follow in the footsteps of his father. He was much older than me, and all he did was tell me mean things. He hit me all the time. It would make me hurt so bad, to where I couldn't move. He'd always laugh and give me this evil look after he was done. Sometimes I felt so out of place and like I didn't belong to this family. I hope so badly that someone will take me away from this awful place called home. I would always pretend that this was a big bad nightmare and was going to end really soon. And then I would wake up and see these people. He was always around Dee, and they acted like I didn't exist at all. At the time, I didn't know which one was better, acting like I didn't exist or to bear the abuse that I was receiving from both of them. With Dee always yelling around the house, ironically, my only escape was the closet. The closet that served as an abusive punishment and lockup for crying became a safe place for me. I would always be in there, no matter what. Sometimes I would just lay back and pretend I was anywhere but here. They would never notice I was gone, not even my father. I wished that he would go away and far away. I wanted all of them to disappear just so I could escape what they were doing to me. I mean, he wasn't doing anything for me. He was just doing so much to me. The abuse was direct from them. And then there was the trickle-down abuse from Dee, which was worse than the physical abuse. Donnie just did what he was seeing and repeated it. When you are so young, they think that you will not remember, but you do. The horrors and nightmares they created for me still haunt me today. All the fighting and yelling just made me feel so scared, and I wanted to disappear. It was just a fearful feeling I felt when I was angry. When those angry words would start flying. They were just like birds in the sky. I knew trouble was coming. In my mind, I did retreat to a safe place. I think every child who is living in dysfunction, especially abuse, would just mentally disappear. One day, I almost did disappear. No one was really watching me. I was left home alone a lot, I guess. And I was leaning over the window a little too far, so I fell from the window. I landed on some grass, which saved me. I was taken to the hospital. I was lucky, though. I had no broken bones, but I had a lot of bruises and scrapes. I was a little beat up from the incident. I also had bruises from before the incident, you know. The police were called, but they did nothing. No questions were asked. A few days later, I went home. Another time, I saw my father and Dee fighting, so I ran away. I ran into a busy street, and all the cars swerved, so they wouldn't hit me. One car came within inches from hitting me. The driver got out of the car in a panic to see if I was okay. I remember he bent down at my level to talk. He probably wanted to know the common question, why in the world is this child in the street? I said nothing to this man. The police showed up, took me by the hand, and gave me to my father. I remember watching a police officer walk away, and so badly I wanted to say something. But I was too scared, being in the arms of an abuser. I had visible bruises in plain view. Again, no questions were asked. Little did the police know, I was probably safer in the street taking my chances with the cars, because the chances I was taking at home were much more dramatizing by a long shot. Every child describes abuse differently. Some don't even refer to it as abuse. It's just something that happens. I did not know the word abuse. In my life, it was just something bad that happens. The rage that came along with it was the scariest to me. It was a look in their eyes, and you knew what was about to happen. Then there were the other times when I was caught completely off guard. I would be smacked, punched, slammed into a wall or the floor. I would be hit with anything they can get their hands on. When I saw it coming, I would try to run and hide. This would make them more angrier, meaning that I would get it worse. You would think that it was something related to something I did. At least that's what I thought. It was just annoying kid stuff, like forgetting to do something, making a mess. People always say, don't cry over spilled milk. Well, in our house, you would, because of what you would get after you spilled the milk. You just tried to be as perfect as you could to make them happy. You go that extra mile just to avoid it. I would make sure my clothes were neat, my sleeping area was clean, and there were no messes that needed to be cleaned up. If I did spill something, I would hurry and clean it before anyone would walk in and see it. Sometimes my heart would beat faster and faster when I would hear the footsteps. I was so scared. After the scary moment was over, I was left broken on the floor. I was in pain, and all I wanted to do was cry. I had these painful marks on my skin afterwards. They didn't disappear for a few days, which was in time for the new ones to appear. The bruises and marks on my face were quite visible, but others could be hidden under my clothes. I was forced to wear certain clothes to cover them. I was always groomed to the fact that the people would come to our home and start asking questions. Afterwards, I was hidden away for a few days after the scary moment so no one could see what they had done to me. There were no doctor visits. I had to just play along. I surely did wish the people who came around asking questions really did come. That would have made me a little happier to know that maybe I get to get saved from all of this. One day, my father just walked out. After that, I never saw him again. Dee never seemed to get over it either. She kept getting into relationships with complete losers. She kept looking for Prince Charming, someone by the name Jim Brady. But she never found what she was looking for. She was looking for love, but all she ended up was with a broken heart. It did not seem to matter, though, just as long as she had some guy there with her, loser or not. I felt bad for her, though. She was always telling me that men were all bad and all they do is hurt you. All they do is use you and walk away, she would say. Dee would warn me that all they were is like my father. It just trickles down one generation to the next, with good and bad. Her mother preached to her on a regular basis that you must have a man to feel worth something and in life and to feel happy. Her mother put the blame on the woman. If you can't keep a man, then it's your fault. She really felt this was true, but it was so far from the truth. If she would have found out all this before, all this pain and heartache, maybe she would have been happy with what she had instead of searching for whatever she was looking for. I think that everyone was told something in their life that they later found out wasn't true. The truth was based on only opinions. The adults in my life were just all out of it. They checked out a long time ago. All the adults in my life just let me down. When Dee told me that all the men were bad, I thought somehow in the back of her head she didn't really believe it. If she did, why would she still be looking for this so-called Jim Brady? My father was told the same thing about women, that all they wanted to do was use men. His father told him that repeatedly, so coming from his father, I would have not listened to a word he said. The messages that they were sending me were putting negative images in my head and my world. Once we went to go see my dad's parents. This was the only time I saw them. We rode the train all the way to Jenna, Louisiana. When we got there, we took a cab to the house where our grandparents lived. My grandfather, his name was Manny, and he was a fair-skinned man with dark hair and brown eyes. He was kind of short. My grandmother, Hannah, was average height, had long black hair, brown eyes, and a medium skin tone. She was darker because she was Native American, so I was told. However, that explanation would change over time. I was pretty mixed up. On my mother's side, my maternal grandfather was Swedish and Italian. And my grandmother was Hispanic, and she was from Madrid, Spain, and I was also part Brazilian. Both of my grandparents, both of my grandfathers actually looked really light. The dark skin in the family definitely did not pass to me. Hannah said my father hated himself because of his mixture. People sometimes don't accept folks with that kind of mix, she said. I was lucky because I looked light, and being lighter was the greatest gift of all. Race was a tricky thing, and it's amazing how some kids come out looking nothing like their parents. It's all about the gene pool and which is stronger. I am the only one in the family who has green eyes. Sometimes you can tell just by looking at the person what they are and their genetic makeup. So they say. My grandparents had lots of problems in their marriage. My grandparents didn't say it, but my grandmother surely gave a lot of body language. She didn't approve of her husband's drinking. She also didn't approve that he started giving his son beer at only 8 years old and let him smoke as well in the fields. She was a strong woman to have put up with all that behavior every single day since they've been together. Then there are the other things, like the other women, the violent behavior. So if you wonder where my dad got it from, you don't have to look too far. I guess what they say is true about dysfunctional families. If you do not stop the pattern, you can repeat it. Considering these patterns are so strong in my family, I better be careful. Donnie really started from where Daddy Dearest left off. When I would cry, my dad would tell Dee to shut me up, or he would. Most of the time, my dad would not even give her the chance. He would just grab me and smack me. Then I would just cry louder and louder until he would just walk out. Then she would yell and hit me some more out of frustration. But now he is gone. The abuse that I did not receive from Daddy anymore, I started to receive from Donnie. He was so much bigger than me. He always had this evil eye in his look, like I said before. He would just look at me, stare at me, like, I'm going to get you good. The sad part is he always did something a little worse than the time before. But when Dee would ask if he did it, he would just nod, protesting what I said. Of course, she would believe him. He wouldn't even get into any trouble for anything he had done to me. In addition to the names he would call me, he would always say I was a mistake. Everyone wished I was never born. He would tell me that all the time. He said, the truth is, you don't even belong to this family. Not really. You only half belong to this family. When Dad walked out, he should have taken you with. That is why Mom hates you. Was this really true? Maybe that's why I don't call her Mom or feel the way I do about her. He was mean, spiteful, and loved to cause pain. He loved telling me the story over and over. Over the years, it became the truth. All I know is that I feel unwanted. It seemed that there was so much time, or maybe no time, for me, and not a soul cared whether I lived or died. Then this boy would make me feel even worse. Sometimes I felt I really did not belong to this family. I really knew that I would not be part of it too much longer. I had this reoccurring feeling and dream. Though it scared me, I was ready for it to happen. Not knowing where I would end up, but then again, I didn't even have a clue where I was. I didn't even know where I was going in this so-called family that God had chosen for me. Not the feeling part of this family, probably, not feeling part of this family was just the start of all my problems. However, not a person even noticed or even gave a second look. It was as if I didn't exist. This feeling of not fitting in even felt worse than when it first started. I never felt this bond that most kids feel with their mothers. Then there was, even some thought that she wasn't my biological mother at all. According to Donnie, the story was that my father brought me home one day. He had married another woman named Catherine. She was my biological mother. It was really killing me that I felt I had no one to relate to. Dee never made me feel any better either. She always believed Donnie when he said he didn't do anything to me. Besides from that, he would always talk. And whenever we went somewhere, it was always his choice. Like once a month, she would get her check and some funny-looking play money. She'd go to the grocery store and go shopping. I would get to choose a box of cereal. I would always choose the Fruit Loops or strawberry shortcake. They always had bright colors, and that made me feel so happy. Bright colors always brought such happiness to me, especially pink. It held a magical spot, and it was a happy moment. We would go to McDonald's and go to the movies. It would always be a scary movie. Whenever I thought of a scary movie, it made me sick to my stomach. But I had to go see it anyway. I felt from such an early age that it wouldn't have mattered if I ever said a word because no one would have looked my way. This was especially true for my so-called family. Donnie made it even worse by calling me a weirdo all the time. He would say that I was found somewhere under a bridge. For some reason, I felt that to be closer to the truth than being from this family. In some ways, I guess he was right. I never talked or gave eye contact. I did not want to be held or kissed by anyone. Or did I? Perhaps it was just these people I didn't want to be close with. I see other kids get held and receive hugs from their parents. I want parents like that. I want to be loved and cared for. I want a family like these kids I see. I don't quite understand why I can't have what the other kids have. I would watch it on television, the reruns of the Brady Bunch, Good Times, and in later years, it was the Cosby Show. So I would pretend to join their family on this show, which made me feel better. There were a few other shows on television I was considering. One of them, I think, had too many kids. And so they had their hands full, I thought. It was nice to pretend, even if it was just an escape for a while. I think it was worth it. I was watching Good Times when I saw something that happened in my life. There was a girl named Penny who was being hurt by her mother. I looked at the television screen intensely because I thought I was looking in a mirror some way. I thought, oh my God, she was like me. This is where I got the word abuse from. I wish a family would try to protect me like they did Penny. Furthermore, I wish there was a neighbor who would offer to adopt me. It made me feel better knowing that I was not the only one this was happening to. I learned from the Brady Bunch that family can be happy time. It made me smile. It made me forget, even if it was just for a little while. The Cosby Show gave me more family time, with the addition of both parents being professionals while being good parents. Later, I learned from a different world that college was a possibility and fun. I learned most of my ambitions and life lessons from these sitcoms and a couple of total strangers. They helped me get through tough, but reality returned quickly. At age 4, the abuse got worse. The abuse started to change. I never thought it would get any better either. Sometimes I felt so much pain and anger towards them for doing this for me. Maybe I could have dealt with it if it wasn't happening so often. I really felt like disappearing into another world. That's just what I did whenever it was happening. I would just pretend that I was far away in a beautiful, wonderful land. I was far away from where I should have been appreciated to begin with. I started school at Little Horse. I was terrified of going to this place every day. My teacher was a short white lady with curly brown hair. She was nice, but I noticed I came to school in the same clothes every day. So she brought some clothes for me in a brown paper bag. During recess, I changed into the clothes while using the coat closet as a dressing room. I was nervous because I had some bruises on me, but most of them were on my back. There were some painful bruises on my upper leg and stomach. I was very shy and timid. I was always so nervous and sensitive to fighting. My behavior raised some questions and eyebrows at school. Questions started to be asked, however, just like the others before. Nothing was done to stop it. Teachers called home, but Dee never answered the phone. I didn't talk much because I found it easier just to stay quiet. Staying lost in my own little world was a safer place. Most of the time, I did not want to come back to this world, but I had to. I did not know why, though. Why come back to deal with this stuff? My world was like a friend that I can go and play with, and then after, I would go home. But in my case, I got to choose all the games we'd play. Why would I want to communicate with the real world? Sometimes kids go in their own little world because the real world isn't being too kind to them. My life was normal, at least from my standpoint anyway. Normal is what you deal with from day to day. My normal would be others' nightmare by comparison. But for me, it was my life. What is normal anyway? Sometimes I feel that adults focus way too much on normal. It seems that there isn't any middle ground either. It's either you're normal or you're weird. When I did go to school, I would always have to wear these long sleeve shirts when I could, so that people would not see the bruises or marks on me. That was the biggest secret. But once the school found out about the abuse, or just had 1 ounce of suspicion, I would have to move again. I was quite the nomad of schools. Usually 4 to 5 in a school year were the norm. I loved going to school so that I could eat. I got free breakfast and lunch, which was nice. There wasn't enough food at home, so most days I could only eat once. I was not really having any meals prepared at home. So just some soup, ravioli, or some other canned items. Some nights when I was in bed, I would be so hungry that my stomach would hurt. I wouldn't complain, though, because it wouldn't have helped. In the morning, I was so tired because I had trouble sleeping due to the hunger pains. I always felt better when I got to school to eat something. I was always thankful for the free meals I would receive. Besides from the abuse going on, Donnie started picking up some really awful habits. This was the start of his destructive behavior. First, he started smoking and drinking. Second, he started smoking some stuff that made him act crazy. Finally, he started on his life of breaking the law. He became so good at it that Dee did not notice a thing and probably will not either. She always felt that he could do no wrong until she gets that thought out of her head. He is going to end up worse off than if she would have just admit to it.